Welcome back to Beyond the Clue by Phong. Today, I hope you're not eating, because the story we're about to explore might make your meal incredibly hard to swallow. This video will tell you about the case of Joe Metheny, the killer notoriously known as the Human Hamburger Killer. Perhaps you've seen this image somewhere. Scary, right? This is Joe Metheny. Just by looking at him, you'll immediately recognize him as an undeniable villain. Born on the 3rd of March, 1953, in Maryland, Joe was the second of 6 children. His father was a heavy alcoholic, and his mother was addicted to drugs. Thus, his childhood began in poverty and hardship. When Joe was 6, his father died in a car accident. After that, he was shuffled from one foster family to another. There isn't much information about why, but perhaps due to his stubborn nature from a young age, no family could keep him for long. At 18, Joe joined the military. During this time, he also became addicted to drugs. Joe served in the military in Germany, and he even fought in the Vietnam War. After leaving the service, he cut off contact with his family and became homeless. His life became increasingly degenerate and reckless. People around him often mocked him, giving him the nickname Tiny, a cruelly ironic moniker, considering his gigantic physique, 6 feet 2 inches tall, and extremely overweight. He frequently frequented bars to get drunk, living in slums or wandering the streets with other homeless individuals in South Baltimore. Occasionally, he found work as a forklift driver in a lumber mill, but all the money he earned was wasted on drugs. But after a few years, in 1994, Joe fell in love with a woman and truly changed for her. He became a full-time truck driver, got married, had a son, and owned a home. Joe's life gradually became prosperous and stable. However, history repeated itself once more when Joe's wife also befriended drugs. One day, after returning from work, Joe was horrified to find his house empty. His wife and child were gone, and even their belongings had vanished. Many neighbors speculated that Joe's wife had taken their 6-year-old child and fled with another man. When Joe heard this, he truly went mad. He roamed the streets for days, searching for them, until he learned that his wife and her lover were living under a bridge. But when Joe arrived, he didn't find his wife. Instead, he encountered 2 other homeless men. The madness still seething within him, he questioned the 2 homeless men about his wife, and when they replied they didn't know, he dealt with them immediately with the axe he was carrying. After that, Joe sought out a prostitute who knew his wife, but this woman also provided no useful information. Frustrated and enraged, he dealt with her as well, dumping her body in a nearby bush. Another prostitute met the same fate. Thus, 4 people became Joe's victims in just a few hours. However, while dealing with the second prostitute, Joe saw a fisherman passing by. Worried that this man might have witnessed his crime, Joe silenced the fisherman with a rusty steel pipe. Finally, he threw his victim into the lake, hoping to dispose of the evidence. Later, after his arrest, Joe Metheny himself told the police, "It was a busy night. I had to deal with 5 victims in 7 hours. 5 victims, and that wasn't the final count." To this day, police have not precisely determined the exact number of victims Metheny murdered. It could be 10, or even 13. In Joe's horrifying confession, he admitted that one victim, Catherine Maginer, he had dismembered into 2 parts. He buried the head far away, and the torso elsewhere. 6 months later, he dug up the head, cleaned it, and did unspeakable things. Just 2 weeks later, Joe Metheny was arrested on charges of murdering the 2 homeless men under the bridge, his first 2 victims in this spree, and he only served 18 months in prison. Yes, you heard that right. Just under 2 years for 2 murder charges. This is considered one of the worst decisions in Baltimore's criminal history. The killer was released early due to lack of physical evidence. After his release, Joe Metheny had no intention of seeking revenge on his ex-wife. Instead, he killed for pleasure, and even made money from it. First, he found work as a forklift driver, then offered to work as a security guard for the lumber mill where he had previously been employed. The mill owner readily accepted his offer, unaware that he was aiding one of the most terrifying serial killers in criminal history. So, having access to the lumber mill at night, Joe Metheny was now free to pursue his dark intentions. He lured 2 prostitutes back to his territory, promising them fun, and then dealt with them. He dismembered his victims, placing the parts in Tupperware containers for freezing. Bones, which couldn't be processed, he buried in a local cemetery. Initially, he only intended to enjoy them himself, but after consuming a few portions, he had the idea to open a hamburger stand on the street. And of course, there was no beef in these hamburgers. His hamburger stand actually attracted customers, so after only a few weeks his supply of special meat ran out. And so, a new hunt began. Kimberly Lynn Spicer, 23, became his next victim. Her body was left in the lumber mill where he worked. On the 8th of December, 1996, Joe texted his friend Rita Camphor to come to the mill for some fun. After their fun, Joe prepared to deal with Rita. But to his misfortune, Rita struggled and managed to escape. Despite his massive physique, he easily subdued his victims, but he found it difficult to chase Rita. Panicked at losing his prey, Joe called a friend to help dispose of Kimberly's body, which was still in the warehouse. However, his friend called the police instead of helping him. On the 15th of December, 1996, Joe Metheny was arrested, ending the nightmare of the street hamburgers in Baltimore. The owner of the lumber mill where Joe worked was also arrested on charges of complicity in murder, as he had attempted to lie to the police about Joe's employment there to protect himself and his business. During his interrogation, Joe confessed to police that he had murdered 10 victims. Some documents cite the number as 13, but his lawyer claimed it was only 3, arguing Joe was mentally unstable and couldn't remember. However, Joe's confessions to the police were chillingly lucid and cold-blooded. The only thing I regret is not getting those 2 annoying people, my ex-wife and the boyfriend she ran off with. Initially, Joe Metheny was sentenced to 50 years in prison for the murder of Kimberly Lynn Spicer. Then, in 1998, his sentence was changed to death row. However, in 2000, the death penalty was abolished by regulation, so Joe's sentence was commuted to life without parole. This decision sparked outrage among many, who believed this monster deserved the death penalty for the horrific things he had done. 17 years later, in 2017, Joe Metheny was found dead in his prison cell at 3 p.m. due to natural causes, ending his 62-year life of crime. Very little information is known about Metheny's wife and son, but one thing is certain: they fled for their lives. And that was the only right decision they could have made. That is all I've uncovered about the case of Joe Metheny, the Human Hamburger Killer. If you know of any other terrifying cannibalism cases, don't forget to leave a comment below. I'll research them and make a video so we can discuss them. And now, goodbye, and see you in the next videos.